Welcome back to the Into Greatness podcast with Jason and Jolene, the second to last episode of season 2 already. I'm Jason, by the way.
I'm Jolene.
Well, and we're ending this with kind of a double header in the sports terminology, right?
Yeah.
Perfect. Bringing in a celebrated author to talk about two things that we talk a lot about on this show. One being adoption, given my adoption experience, and then belonging for the second episode coming out next week. So, Joe, why don't you introduce our guests? We'll just get rolling.
We've got Julie McGue here. She is an adoptee, a twin, and an author, and she writes about finding who you are, where you belong, and making sense of it. And I just think this is a beautiful way for us to wrap things up in a bow. And I think that, there is a lot of generalizable knowledge that comes from all of this that's going to hit everyone, or either personally or to help understand somebody in their life who may be affected this way. Because I actually think this is, we think of things like being adopted or being a twin as such a unique experience, but I think we're going to learn it's actually not.
Far more common than people think. But why don't we let Julie come in, tell a bit of her story, and we'll just take it from there. So welcome, Julie. Thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, this is awesome to be on your show. I've listened to it many times. So great to be in this seat.
Thank you. Where are you from, Julie?
I'm from the west suburbs of Chicago, but because I'm retired age, I spend most of the winters in Florida, where I also have family.
That's
amazing.
Fantastic.
Where are you right now as we're recording?
I am on the shores of Lake Michigan in Michigan City, Indiana, and I can see the skyline in Chicago from here.
Oh,
amazing.
Man. I'd love to go there, but that's more of a travel story. So, Julie, like, you've written several books. What sort of inspired you to sort of take your story and tackle it in terms of, like, something that you put out there for the public to consume?
So this is such a good question, because I did not really have any aspirations to be a writer. I was a journaler all through life, so certainly I was writing, but not for public consumption. And when I was 48, I was sent for a breast biopsy, and with no family medical history because of my closed adoption, my twin sister, who was adopted with me, we decided, let's give it a shot. We are owed at least something to hang our hat on. And between us, we have 6 kids. So we really were feeling an obligation to them too. So we went down the path of trying to figure out what we could know. And fortunately for us, the state of Illinois was changing their adoption laws. And that allowed us access to our original birth records, something that, most people take for granted. But my original birth record, unfortunately, had my birth mom's name. She used an alias, which was perfectly legal back in the 1950s and 60s. Also legal, my birth father's name was nowhere on there. And so we really had nowhere to go and signed up for this state-sponsored program. We were assigned a confidential intermediary, and she was given permission from the judge to open our closed adoption records. And fortunately for us, our birth mom had a very unusual last name, and she was able to find her right away.
Wow. Now, having been through that myself, I know what that can feel like. How did that feel like for you?
Well, as I write about in my book, which is what the original question was, I didn't know how to get started and needed this intermediary to help me. And the more the story unraveled, because my birth mom wasn't happy that we found her, and my adoptive mom was not happy that I was going down this path. So there was a lot of conflict, and it was a roller coaster ride. And everybody I talked to about it said, hey, you should write this story. So I did start learning how to write, and took me about 10 years to learn how to write and learn how to write the story of our adoption search and reunion. Where I sit now, I am so grateful that that breast biopsy led to figuring out my identity. My sister's grateful. Our children are. We figured out a lot of questions. It's a much prettier place to be where I am now than it was in 2011 and 2014, with a lot of negative energy. Birth relatives We think that they're sitting out there waiting for us to find them, and they are not. They're afraid. They've battled a lot of their own demons, a lot of shame back in the 1960s about being unwed parents or single mothers, that kind of thing. So there was big learning curve for me to understand the things that my birth relatives, my birth parents, went through in trying to keep this a big secret.
Well, and that's really interesting because I know, like, because I was born in 72. So, and I know that the adoption sort of experience here sounds very similar to that. Like, it wasn't something you talked about. And I didn't even find out until I was like 14 that I was adopted, because I think there's fear
Oh,
on
wow.
the adopted family side of something. Um, but I know that my birth mom, she reached out apparently several times to get a hold of me, but none of those contacts got to me, which
Mm.
was interesting. Um, Growing up, I know I felt like, even though I was very loved in the family, I always felt something was off. Like, I was a bit different than everyone else in the family. Did you sort of find that yourself, but not really know why at first? Or
Oh, absolutely. That, I just really felt, I love my parents and they were good parents, but I don't think that my mom understood my sister and I. The unique thing about being a twin and being adopted is, even though you've got this confusion about your identity and where you came from and why the heck people placed you for adoption, what was the story behind that? Nobody knew. I had this person, a full sibling, who I looked like, acted like, and we were our own little pod, the two of us. In fact, my adoptive mom said to us one time, I just can't get in between you two. And, I think even if she was our biological mom, she wouldn't have been able to. That bond between my sister and I is just an amazing thing. I'm astounded by it now, even at my age, because we still do weird stuff like show up in the same outfit
Yes.
or the same shoes. And our husbands just kind of look at us like, oh God, you know, we all get a
I
kick out of it.
I love that, Julie. Again, speaking as somebody who has identical twins who have very much individuated, they express themselves very differently visually, but what they have is something like no other. Even somatically, they feel each other's pain and ailments at times too. But what's highlighted there for me, and both you and Jason talk about this, and I'll just reference, my ex-husband was adopted. And when we had our first child, he went through the process of finding family, and thank goodness for Facebook and a unique last name and location, he was able to find a family member, actually an uncle, who started telling the story of he's never connected with his biological mom. But that story and learning all of that, I got to witness that, right? And it was very similar to this in terms of even people in my office, the wounds of not only the biological parent and what they're bringing as their insecurities or wounds and traumas of giving up at adoption and what they were experiencing, but so many wounds of the parent who adopted. And often adoption is required because perhaps as women, we can't have children. So there's an innate
Correct.
poor cognition of there's something wrong with me, or I can't do it, or, that sort of thing. So they already feel disempowered from what they weren't possibly able to do, or again, it could have been the other partner's inability to do that, or strictly choice. But often that insecurity is what creates so much of this discord that's really gets in the way of understanding why you just need to understand the other part of your story. This is
Hmm.
a part of your story in existence. And it doesn't mean it's because you're unhappy with the parenting they offered. It's because you have another piece that needs to be fulfilled for you.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
what's so interesting about what happened to me when I was in my late 40s is, I'm almost a middle-aged woman, and I would have thought that my adoptive mom would have been more secure in her role with my sister and I. And so when they always said that they would help us if we needed to, and certainly I needed to. But she withdrew her support. And it really puzzled me that she could go back on her word. She did eventually come around. In the end of the story, I find a half brother and a half sister We share the same father. It turns out, and this is why I had to write the book, that not only did most of us in my family, the Ryan family, my maiden name, know my brother already, but the fact that we didn't know he was our brother and that my mom liked him and he had married the girl next door, it sort of sped everything up and kind of pulled all of the family together. And even my siblings that I grew up with. So my folks had 3 adopted kids and 3 biological kids. The younger ones were the biological kids. Even they were like, this is so cool. We love your brother. We had no idea he was your brother. But there wasn't this distance that you sometimes see when adoptive people connect with their biological relatives. It's like, okay, they have to be over there and you have to be over there and we're never going to mix. But that wasn't what happened because they already knew him. We would have all these family barbecues. And well, anyway, it was a beautiful ending to the story, but not a perfect story in the sense I never met my birth father. He was alive. He chose not to meet my sister and I, even though I have this relationship with this new brother, right? And then he died of a heart attack before he could change his mind. So it's mostly a happy story. I think it's a happy story. Do I feel bad that I didn't meet my biological father? A little bit. I would have liked to eyeball him and see what he looked like and just kind of take in his presence. My adoptive dad, I loved him. He was just a gem. If you wanted a checklist of the dad you wanted to have, he would have been the dad you wanted to have. So I wasn't looking to replace him. I just would have liked to have met him.
Yeah, there's so many parallels to your story and mine. It's just crazy because, because my adoptive dad was amazing. Like same thing. He died of a heart attack when I was 19, so quite young. And then my adoptive mom, that sent her into a whole spiral. And I waited until after she passed away to even look, because I knew it wouldn't have gone well to look, obviously, right? Which is kind of, it's unfortunate to know, like you say, like you kind of hope you would get the support you'd want, because it's an emotional trip. And the only reason I ended up really wanting to look was more like I was 48 when I decided, 48, 49. So kind of the same age you were at.
Same number.
Like, yeah, right. You're in this place in life where you start to have questions, like, even in terms of your, like, especially having a child of your own longevity, like, what are health issues you got to worry about, like all this kind of stuff, and a curiosity to see where you belong. And the family, actually, like I have a brother and a sister, same sort of thing. They're younger, but like my brother, I think, is 6 years younger than me. But the family name Chamberlain, which would have been my birth father's name, my adopted mom, her dad, who died when she was 3's last name was Chamberlain. And they were actually related to the person who became my birth father. Like it's crazy. Wow. Like just, and that was like, it's Canada, man. It's a big country. Like, how does this even happen? But they did a genealogy. My birth family did a genealogy test when they found out about that and did all the going back. So there's enough similarities there.
And I think sometimes, like, what I hear consistent in your guys' story is that you were at a place where you were secure in your life. You had your children, you had, like a lot of your life established, and you weren't looking from a place of filling voids and chasing things. You were like, yeah, this is another piece of information that would be amazing to learn. And you weren't doing it to offend anybody. But when your mom, like your adopted mom, pulled away and broke that promise to you, in essence, you are going through that rejection wound and that abandonment wound all over again. It literally mimicked what would have happened when you were given away at birth. And for you to experience that at the same time that you were trying to resource that wound was probably really difficult at that time. Hey?
Yeah, it was. And I was adopted through Catholic Charities. And they were very instrumental in me kind of healing from all of this rejection. So they have an adoption support group for people that are going through adoption search and reunion. And the social worker, it would pull us in the same room, birth moms, adoptive mom and parents, and adoptees. and everybody would share their stories. And what was moving about that was to see birth moms just sobbing about the child that they placed for adoption, and their regret and the pain that they felt over that. And so I developed such a compassion for my birth mom, in spite of the fact that she initially rejected us, and it took her almost a year to change her mind. But our relationship is still pretty strong. It's not the bond that I have with my adoptive mom, but I'm really, really happy that I found her. She's in the book, I put her in Wisconsin, but she's really from northern Minnesota, which is where my birth father was, and they all have Canadian roots with Chippewa tribe. So that was a piece of my identity that I didn't have a clue about. Never saw that coming. And it's been an interesting thing as I've gotten older to realize, wow, this is a whole culture that I'm part of, but I didn't know, and I'm not connected to it. So I'm still trying to figure out how I feel about that, being denied that a very important piece of information about my identity.
How much more complete do you feel now, though? Like compared to say how you felt before? Like, do you feel a lot of the things that didn't add up now kind of make sense? Because I know myself, like the Hewletts are all like construction worker builders kind of thing. I never had a natural affinity for it, but I'm a writer and a storyteller. And I found out that's like, my birth mom's very much a writer and a storyteller. I have an interest in the paranormal, and so does she. Like things that just make a lot more
Yeah.
sense now for me. You found the same?
I definitely. So I have a lot of spiritual voices and things that visit me every once in a while, and visions, if you would. And in talking with my birth mom, she was explaining about her family and where they came from, and that runs in the family. So some of those things I didn't feel so weird. Twins also run in her bloodline, so I'm really shocked that I don't have any twin grandkids yet, but I feel so much more complete. In fact, I wrote an essay about a friend of mine had asked me, what's the happiest moment of your life? And I really thought about it in our conversation, and I said, you know what, I'm not going to say what everybody else says, which is when you hold your child or your children for the first time, or you get married. One of the happiest moments of my life was listening to my birth mom's voice on the phone for the first time, because it had been 50 years. Just hearing her voice, I didn't know if I was ever going to get to meet her, which I did, but hearing her voice was just almost crippling. It was all that fantasy and that build up, and then it was happening. And so it really is a self-actualizing moment to figure out what all those little secrets that were denied.
Her voice was wired into your core though, Julie. So your nervous system was literally like created in her womb. You heard her voice during your incubation period, right?
Right.
So that is the frequency that your nervous system was accustomed to. So that became your safe, your home, your familiar. That was the first thing that you regulated with from your existence. And then you come earthside and you never heard it again.
No,
So
she never saw us or held us. So
that
yeah,
is a
she was
true
gone.
sense of coming home.
Wow.
Wow. So
Love
not
that.
only was it the cognitive and emotional framework of everything you had imagined and worked up to, it was also your body's response. Like that has nothing to do with the mind. That entirely has to do with all of the like neuron reactions within your body. Yeah. That's so powerful. That's really neat.
It is. That's something I never thought of either. Like, you'd get that as a mother's perspective. That's
Yeah.
that's where the nervous system comes from.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's
Oh.
yeah.
Have you been back to the land? Because when you talk about, was your mom the one of Indigenous roots?
They both were.
They both were.
They both were. They were some different tribes. My birth mom also had Cree Indian also. I've done a lot of research about my family, and certainly my brother, who is 1/4 Chippewa, which means that I'm close to that. He's given me all the genealogy, and I would like to go up to Detroit Lakes, which is where my birth dad was from. He lived right outside the reservation there, so it's on my
Wow.
list to do.
Yeah, I would not be surprised if you had a similar feeling to when you heard mom's voice, because your connection to the land is so much more profound through those ancestral roots. And especially when you say, like, I have voices and visions come to me, right? These are like the ancestral communication strings, the callings, right? That no matter where you are, you were getting these callings back in a sense. I
Yeah.
wonder, I really, when you decide to do that, please, like, I want to follow that part of your journey, because and imagine, like, you very much appear a white woman in North America, right? So to be exploring this, it's gonna potentially highlight another part of your I don't belong, the othering piece, right? That you
Mm.
may have felt as an adoptee. Now you're gonna potentially feel that from a cultural, racial standpoint. And these come from stolen identities, which has happened in colonization, but it also happened through something you didn't have choice over, which is who cared for you through your life when you came into this world. So that might be something that you proactively hold really gently for yourself in
Okay,
that
I
process.
love this idea. I want to tap into something that you said, the stolen identity, because I was just at a luncheon yesterday with an author that wrote a book about the Chippewa tribe, and she's actually quite a really cool person. But I was explaining to her that my birth father's name is not on my original birth record, which means I cannot claim membership in the Chippewa tribe because his name is not on there. And so it's another one of those lack of belonging things. I don't belong because I don't have this proof. But because my brother and I did DNA analysis, she was explaining to me that some tribes will honor the DNA test, the positive test, and give you like a provisional membership. So it's something that I'm going to explore. And I'm excited about that because maybe it's all going to work out and I'm going to feel better about
A-
that
And
not
remember,
belonging.
provisional membership and that kind of stuff, that's white man legislation. That is, again,
Yeah,
that is not your sense of belonging, right? Like, the
right.
fact that if you truly want to be connected to your roots, and your brother can help be the bridge to that, and they love and accept and mentor you through cultural practice, and you have your own rite of passage with them, I mean, fuck what the legislation says, right?
Yeah.
Like, at that point, who gives a shit? It's a last name on a piece of paper or whatever. If you get that feeling you had when you heard your mom's voice, and you feel this sense of belonging, which we are going to get into in the next episode with you, of identity and belonging, right? That's your answer right there. You don't need to prove that to anybody, right? And I just think that that will be such a beautiful process. You just have a knowing for, you know where you sit, like, you know where you land at that point. That's
Thank
neat.
you. I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I guess sort of as a kind of a wrap-up question for this segment here, Julie, what advice would you give to someone who does want to track down, who was adopted and wants to kind of look into their history and try to track down their birth family? Because I know I just kind of winged it, it's much the same way that you did. What would you say to people who are maybe thinking about going on this road that we did?
Well, for sure, connect to people, whether it's on Facebook or Instagram. There's a lot of Facebook groups with adoptees and of all ages, closed adoption adoptees like me, or open adoption adoptees. There's a lot of groups that you can connect to listen, hear what other people have done, and know what the pros and cons are. I mean, it's not for the faint of heart. It's definitely something that you consider what could happen. It could trigger a lot more rejection, abandonment issues. So prepare yourself in the best way. My book that I wrote, Twice a Daughter, is kind of a how-to of a lot of things that were mistakes and roadblocks that I ran into and how I got around them. So, for example, my birth mom gave me sort of the right name for my birth dad, but not not the right name. The last name was a little bit Jimmy rigged. And so I couldn't find him. And it took a year and a half of the confidential intermediary going on all of these dead ends. And just by a whim, I contacted a genealogist. There was only one in the state of Minnesota, in the town that where my birth parents were from. And I talk about this in the book. It turns out that genealogist was also adopted. She knew exactly what to do. And she literally parked herself in the city directory office because she knew the people, because she was doing this for other people. And she came back to me and she said, "You don't have the right name. And I think it's this guy. And I think you need to send him a letter." It turns out she was 100% correct. And so I think you have to read a lot of books and talk to a lot of people when you're going down this path of search and discovery, because you can learn from everybody's mistakes. And there's always a workaround, for goodness sakes. And don't give up. You can do it. It just may take longer and be more frustrating than you want it to be.
I'm goosebumpy when you talked about that woman, because that I don't know if any decision you made would have actually changed that. You were meant to find her, and she was meant to help you on that path. You were meant to find this information in the timing that you found it in. Like, those are the things you can't make up, right? Like, again, on a whim, I found this. No, you had a knowing and you followed the road signs. We talk about that a lot, just our intuitive followings and the guidance that we get, right? That's a perfect, I think, example of that, right? Where people, places, and things roll into our lives at the right time to help guide us where we need to go, and see maybe the things that we need to see. And I bet you there was something really cool for her on that end that resourced her in a way that maybe she didn't have that opportunity for herself, but she finally got to offer it to someone else, or whatever that looked like, right? The other thing I wonder if it's helpful to note, because I got to witness this as well, like I said, watching my ex go through it, but, remembering that at the end of the day, the decision you're making is purely for you, and that the decision to seek out where you physically, biologically entered this world, right? To find those connections, that is a decision you are making for you. And you're going to piss somebody off potentially, and you can't keep living for that reason. And just allow yourself to stay committed to what you need, because there is a fear. You're putting yourself out there in the most vulnerable place to be like, "Hey, it's me again. Did you want me?" That is terrifying, right? And you're still going to choose that. And to think that the people who you love and have taken you, chosen more so than I think sometimes a birth parent chooses. They chose to bring you through this world. The risk of them abandoning you for that choice, right? Those are big, big decisions. So I hope there's people on the other end of this that are adoptive parents or siblings that have maybe an adoptive sibling in the family. I really hope you hear that loudly, that if somebody is going and looking back to where their biological roots come from, it is not because you have done anything wrong, and it is not because you lack or you are not enough. It is simply an additional piece of them that they need, right? Because I think that can really taint a really beautiful journey for all of you,
Yeah. And I think we don't realize until we start on this path and get some answers how much those answers really do mean inside to each of us. I think we have a tendency, adoptees, to kind of stuff it away. Well, I can't know, so it just has to be okay. It's when we attain even the smallest piece of information about our identity that we really feel better about ourselves and our situation.
Absolutely. It does make all the difference.
Yeah, you didn't realize that you needed to know what that feeling of your mom's voice felt like until you felt it. Most of the time, it's self-preservation. You're not going to go longing for something you're not going to find. You'll protect yourself from it. Even Jay, looking at you, and like, you and your brother are pretty similar. You even wore the same pants,
same
like the
pants,
same
shirt
outfit
combo to a celebration of life, and we looked at each other, and it was just like, of course.
Right.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah. I remember when my ex had said, like, and he felt very loved by his family and his cousins and stuff growing up. But I remember when he saw the first photo of like his mom and aunts and uncles and stuff, biological, that the uncle had sent, and he goes, "Oh my God, I look like all of them." And they have these very distinct ears. And he's like, "I look like everybody." And that moment, I remember seeing that and being like, whoa, profound, right? He didn't know there was a lack of belonging until he knew where he belonged in that sense, right? It would be like if you're a monkey being raised by whales and you finally see a bunch of other monkeys, like, whoa, there's more needs, right? So really just
Yeah.
like, recognizing just the power and the value of what that offers us when we have it, and why would we want to deny somebody of that, purely based out of our wounds and insecurities or whatever those things be. So yeah. Wow.
So Julie, because we're out of time on this one, where do people find you and what is the title of the book again that specifically deals with adoption?
You can find me on juliemcgueauthor.com. And I've got 2 books out. Twice a Daughter is the book about the search for my birth relatives. And Belonging Matters is a collection of essays about adoption and family and kinship. And then I have a third book coming out in February that my readers were like, we want to know more about what it was like for twins to grow up and be adoptees. So I wrote that story. A lot of family secrets get unveiled, some that I didn't even know about till I started digging, and that comes out in February.
That's fantastic.
I'm excited
I
for
know.
that. Oh, that's amazing. And honestly, one of the coolest things to hear from you is I wasn't a writer and I didn't aspire to be a writer. And I love that, because I have writing a book on my bucket list and I did not aspire to be a writer. But what I love is sharing stories and equipping other people. And what do we do when we're looking for more? We look to others who have been down that path. And one of the ways to pass that on is through story. And I wonder if your Chippewa roots and narrative dialogue and carrying of the stories is really what you're being called to do through a lot of that. So I feel a lot of connection in that area for you, which is amazing. And that's the world that we live in. We have this beautiful ability to give written history now instead of just verbal. So that's so cool that you allowed yourself to go into terrifying territory of like, how do I write a book? Right?
Yeah.
So
Well, I think you just gave me the idea for my 4th book, Claiming My Cultural Identity.
I love that.
All right. Well, Julie, thanks for joining us on this episode. You're coming back next week to talk belonging. Until then, I am Jason.
I'm Jolene.
And we'll talk to you again next week.